Hey, welcome. Today is Theory Thursday. It is the 21st of August 2025. Today we're going to talk about scales, how to learn scales, how to practice scales, and what's a good way to actually understand a scale. For our example, we're going to be using the first shape of the G major scale. We're going to venture a little into the E minor scale, which is of course the same notes in a different order. And we are also going to talk a little bit about the major and minor pentatonic scales that exist within these shapes. So let's go over the shape real quick. The shape we're talking about here is this. Second fret of the E string, our root on the third fret of the E string, fifth fret of the E string. Repeat that second, third, fifth on the A string. On the D string, we are second, fourth, fifth, second, fourth, fifth on the G string. We are third and fifth only on the B string. Second, third, and fifth on the high E string. So that is the shape we are talking about here. That doesn't really tell us much about the actual scale because the scale lives in there, but that is not the scale. That is actually two repetitions of the scale with an extraneous note on either end. So let's just play both positions of the scale by themselves, and we're going to call out the notes as we do so. So this is our root, G. That's A, the second. This is B, the third. C, the fourth. D, the fifth. E, the sixth. F sharp, the seventh. And G, we're back to the root. So let's do that with shape one more time here. So that's 8 notes. That's a full octave of the G major scale. Let's look at the second position, or the second scale within this position. That's going to start here on the root. There's our second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root. And of course, this fifth fret of the high E string is the second, A. But of course, that's outside of the two scales we're talking about. So let's go through the whole shape again and call out what number of the scale we're on. So seventh, root, second, third, fourth, fifth, fifth, sixth, sixth, seventh, root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root, second, root, seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second, root, seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second, root, seventh. So how do we get the G major scale in particular under our fingers? By repeating it. And I suggest you alternate repeating it by saying the note names and saying the numbers. So first time through, it'll be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G, F sharp. Now, again, we're going to go through it with just the numbers. So root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root, seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second, root, seventh. We do that again with the bottom shape. So that would be root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, root, root, seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second, root, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, root, G. Okay, so that is our G major scale. That is both positions of our G major scale. I would suggest practicing those in isolation. And you can do this with or without a pick. I've been using my fingers, but let's use a pick for a minute here. So what else can we do with this? Well, we can pick out our chord tones, right? So we got first, third, fifth. So how else do we get first, third, fifth? Well, there's our first, there's our third, there's our fifth. So there's our G chord. Let's look at another chord. Let's look at our 4 chord, the C chord. How do we get to a C? Well, we need a C, an E, and a G. How else do we get to a C, E, an E, and a G? Well, we've got the open G, we've got the open E. Make sure we're hitting a C in 2 different places. Let's look at our 4 chord, that's the D. How do we get a D? We get a D, D note, F sharp note, and an A note. How else do we get to a D? Well, we got the F sharp here. Got the D there. Got the A here. So that's our D chord. Helps us really understand where chords come from when we play this game. And you can really go through the entire scale this way. I also suggest going through the scale as chords. That is, rather than playing the G note, the A note, the B note, you play G chord, A chord, B chord, C chord, D chord, E chord, F sharp chord. You're obviously not going to play through that quite as fast as you play through the scale, but it's something you can do. It's something you can do to increase your understanding. Now let's talk about the minor scale that lives within here. As we know from our study of relative minors, the E minor scale is the same notes in a different order than the G major scale. So how do we find the E minor scale in here? Well, where's our first E? We can actually wait for the first E in the shape, which is located right here. 2nd fret of the E string. That's our 6 within the actual progression we're using. What's interesting is because this starts in a different place, there aren't 2 full iterations of it if we go through the notes in order. There's 1 iteration sort of in the middle here. And we don't quite get back to a full E scale unless we incorporate the root notes. So let's cheat a little and start with the root note here. So that's our 6, which is the 1 of the minor scale. Then we go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there's our E, there's our root again. So that's the E minor scale. So let's do the next shape here. So this goes E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, So we can do the same games we just played with the G major scale with the E minor scale. So that's one of the scales that is hiding within that G minor shape, but there's two more. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the G major pentatonic scale and the E minor pentatonic scale. So let's review what the E minor pentatonic scale looks like in this position. So that particular scale, I'm going to start here on the G. So that's the E major or E minor pentatonic scale shape, or let's call it the G major. Let's start with G major first, all right? Don't want to make this confusing. All right, so the G major pentatonic scale goes root, second, third, fifth, sixth, root. So those numbers that I said, those are numbers from the G major scale. So the pentatonic scale always consists of the root, the second, the third. You skip the fourth, you go to the fifth, the sixth, you skip the seventh, and you go back to the root. That's why it's called pentatonic, because there are 5 tones in the pentatonic scale. So let's just play with that G major pentatonic. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, root, root, 6, 5, 3, 2, root. Of course, much like the G major pentatonic scale, or much like the G major scale, there are 2 iterations because it's a subset of the G major scale. So here's the second iteration. You should already know where this is, but I'll take you through it. Root, second, third, fifth, sixth, root. There we go. And of course, it's also valuable to go through this and say note names. So that first position, G, A, B, D, E, G. G, E, B, D, A, G. One more thing to cover, and that is the location of the E minor pentatonic scale within this. If we don't cheat and use the root position, the open strings, we go E, G, A, B, D, E. Now, what is cool about the E minor pentatonic scale and the G major pentatonic scale? Well, it's a completely natural scale, no sharps or flats. That's true of a few more pentatonics than it is of majors, because C is the only totally natural major scale. But the G major pentatonic scale is also free of sharps and flats. So, I suggest doing this with one position a day. And if you don't understand what I mean by positions, let's go up to, we'll just do the major scale for this one. Let's look at the next position of the G major scale. Now, the way we normally play these positions, there's an overlap. So let's play with the overlap. The next position looks like this. So we're starting at the 5th fret where we stopped. We're going 7th, 8th, 5th, 7th, 4th, there's our root, 7th, 4th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 8th, there's our root again, 5th, 7th, 8th. So eventually there are 5 shapes. You're going to have to know what those shapes are for every scale of every note, and you're going to have to know that how those shapes differ for every note. So the key to memorizing the neck long term is knowing, okay, so this is what the G major pentatonic looks like. So we'll go over that again. So what shape looks like that for, say, the D major pentatonic? Well, that's going to be between the 11th and 15th frets. So we're going to be 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 11, 12, 14, 11, 12, 14, 12, 14, 15, 12, 14, 15. That's what it's going to look like in D major. And once you've known all the note names for this, once you've actually gone through this exercise in detail, it gets a lot easier to find where those notes are on the other scales, because you know that this is a G. That's always a G. This is always a G. You know that, like, this is always a G. So when G comes up in another scale, you already know it's G if you've been over that before. So that is how I suggest practicing the scales. Another element to this, if you want to go back to, say, our 2nd fret position of G major, is building up the speed. So you start a metronome, you just play through the whole shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And then you just bring up the speed gradually, and you want to bring up that speed for most of your practice time to the point where you're not going to make mistakes, where you're getting clean notes. And some things to watch out for is going too staccato to keep up. Like if you're, that's too fast. You want to be, only go as fast as you can do that. But for a few minutes at the end of every practice session, I want you to push yourself to the point where you're making a few mistakes, because that's where you're wiring new motor neurons. So if you're, see, I made a mistake. I went down 1 fret early. You want to be at least some of your practice time at that speed where you start making mistakes, but then you want to dial back to a speed where it's smooth, where it's on the edge of being effortless, but you still have to focus a little. That's where you want to be, because that's how you get the reps in. There is a school of thought that says you should spend about 25% of your practice time at that point where you start making mistakes. At this phase in my learning, speed is not my main goal. Accuracy is my main goal. So I have not yet taken that advice. I am focusing on smooth, repeatable, and accurate. And I suggest you do the same at first. When it's time for more speed, I think you'll know it. I think you'll be aware of what that looks like. So thank you very much. As you've noticed, I haven't put out a weekly update or an alternate tuning Tuesday this week. It has been a pretty busy week. I might still throw together a brief version of my weekly update here later today, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.